Now, this is not out of the box. I customize my system. I add icons, I've added ribbon tab. I prefer my resource bar over here on the right instead of the left. It's optional, it's up to you. As I tell people, somebody say, well, gee, you know, why do you do it that way? And I say, well, do you prefer it somewhere else? Yes. Do we give you an option? Yes. Well, then use it. Trust me, if we didn't want you to do it, we have ways of preventing you from doing it. So if it's optional, go with it, you know, go for it. So I try to use the system, I try to use the software the way a good user would use it. And that's one of my roles inside the company, is to try to represent to the developers at least somebody close by who is trying to use the software in a fashion similar to what I expect our users to do. So I customize things, I don't run it out of the box. I don't like something, I change it, just as we would expect you to do, and so on. Now, first thing I'm going to talk about here, first thing I have an obligation to tell you. I'm obligated to say this. We have been warning you for 2 years. We told you when 9 came out, we told you when 10 came out, that NX11 would be ribbon only. There is no option anymore. Now, in 9 and 10, it was interesting when we during beta testing in 9, we actually had one very large customer, very large, who said, if you're going to do this, we want to have an option to turn off the ability to switch from one interface to the other, you know, to switch to the old. Because we don't want half our people using the old interface, half our people using the new interface, and then having to have to try to support 2 different, you know, kind of sets of users. So some of you may work for companies that have decided to take advantage of that option, so you may not have the option to switch back. Now, doesn't mean that you'd be ribbons only. It could be, you know, forcing you to one or the other. But starting in 11, there will be no option. It'll be ribbon only. So just live with it. Get on the program. Trust me. Once you start using it, I had just as much trepidation as everybody else did when they told me we were going to a ribbon interface. You should have heard my response the first time I heard that. But now that I've been on it and saw what we could do with the customization, I'm sold. Okay, user interface changes. The first user interface change that you're going to notice, if you take advantage of it, is the fact that you can now change displayed parts by using what we call a control tab, which actually is an industry standard for multi-document applications. Now, let me be clear here. NX is not precisely a multi-document application. Yes, you can have multiple files open at the same time, but only one file can be displayed at a time. That's not really the definition of a multi-document application. But we've made NX as much like a multi-document application as we can at the moment, and this is one of the features that you can do. So I can just use the tab to switch like between, you know, parts, or I can just press mouse button 1 in the graphics window, and it's the first icon. We've added it there, which takes you there, and then you can use the mouse wheel, which, by the way, this is one of those things during beta testing. Somebody says, well, gee, we got this thing up here. Can we use the mouse wheel to go from item to item rather than using things like the arrow keys or just use the direct cursor? So that was one of the ideas that we hadn't thought about it at all. Was not in the spec. But during beta, somebody brought it up, and so we had enough time to implement that. Now, the normal way is, like I said, is using Control Tab, because that's the sort of the standard out there for the industry. And of course, setting the tab then moves it from item to item, but you can still also use the mouse wheel at this point, or you can still go in and just select with the cursor. Now, there's other places, like for example, there's the window command up here, which is the old one. So that's the old way of getting to the display parts. We've also put the switch windows, the new one, up there as well, up in this bar, and then it behaves just like you did it. Again, you can use the mouse wheel to change, and so on. Now, something else here. I'm going to bring up this. So this is the drawing for this master part. This is the master model, and this is the drawing. Now, did you notice that I went from modeling to drafting and back to modeling and didn't have to change applications? We now remember what it was you were in when you left that drawing. This isn't necessarily what it was when you saved it. It's what it was in your current session. So, like I said, we're trying to make NX work more and more like a multi-document application, and this is one aspect of it. So we're remembering the application, and in fact, if you look here, there's a little symbol here. That tells me this is a modeling, drafting. Here's a sheet metal part. If I pick that, now I'm in sheet metal. If I had a routing part up here, going to it, I would have automatically gone into routing. If I had a CAM part, I would automatically go into CAM. So the application will be remembered at your last time you had that part displayed. And these are displayed parts. These are not the icons. These are not the previews that were saved with your part. For example, if I zoom up on this and then look at what my preview looks like now, you're actually seeing a thumbnail of the display, the current display. What we're doing here, this is an architectural project, and this is the first benefit of it, is the fact that we have this new way of switching display parts. But you're going to see that the performance of switching parts is going to be much better, because we're not throwing those display files away. We're keeping them open, keeping them on the in memory. So changing display parts is going to look faster. Now in 12, we're sort of taking all of this architectural stuff, and we're now going to make NX into a true multi-document application, and the implications that that has for you. And that's as far as I can go in the explanation. Those that were at beta testing had a chance to play with it, had a chance to comment on it, and so on, but they were under non-disclosure, as I am on that particular feature, because it's not in this product. I can talk about what's in 11, except for one other topic, which I can't talk about at all, because the patents are still pending, and we don't want to say anything in public until we've nailed down the patents, but it'll be in 11. Now, if I just do a control tab, it acts like the last button on your remote control. It just switches back and forth between the last two parts, and that's it. Now, as part of this project, there are other places where you have access to a place where you can switch, or you can select an open part. For example, if I wanted to close a part, close a selected part, what you got in the past was a list, and you still get a list today. The difference is that if I go over the list, I get to see the preview, so that I know what it is that I'm closing. You ever close a part and find out it wasn't the right one? Now, but we also, while we're here, well, let's just put up icons. Let's just do icons in general. And they can be medium icons, they can be small icons, they can be extra small icons, they could be what we call a tile, or the list. The default is a list. This will happen now wherever inside of NX you were given a dialog in which you had a list of the open parts. You will get these options. For example, adding a component to an assembly, adding a view to a drawing where you have the opportunity of picking a view out of a different part file. It gives you a list of part files you can select from. Now you'll get the same options, either the pop-up preview or a set of icons and so on. So we're making it like a little Explorer window here. And that'll be everywhere. There's about 6 places inside of NX where you actually have a list of the open part files. And this has been enhanced for all of that. So that's a change to the user interface. And it's the most significant one, even though it doesn't necessarily look like significant here. It's because it's part of this much larger architectural project, which is both a performance project and in 12 a significant change in the way you will deal with multiple parts that are open in your session. Now, these are not the parts that have been open. These are parts that are actually open in memory. So when I do this, all these parts are currently in memory. Those of you who've learned that the history file, this is a list. You can use it as a way of changing display parts, but it's really a history of the files that have been open. They might be closed, but they have been open. These are the files that are actually open at the moment in your session. And of course, if this window gets more populated, then you'll get scroll bars. Okay. Another change in user interface is we've changed the information window, and I'm going to bring up this part here, and I'm going to go into analysis. Here's my analysis. I'm going to do a examine geometry. I'm going to pick everything. and say examine geometry, and I'm going to generate a report from the information window. And this is what the new report looks like. This is the new format for the information window. It looks more modern to start with. It's an HTML document also, which means that when I go to save it, the default is to save it as an HTML document, which means you can bring it up in a cursor, or I mean in a browser, which just fits real nicely. We didn't have a presentation today. Maybe over in the Team Center session they might have had a presentation on the Active Workspace. The Active Workspace is a browser-based way of accessing the data inside of NX or inside of Team Center. Well, it's browser-based, so these files will be directly available to be opened inside that browser. And now, you can still save them as text files if you need to, like in the past. Some people have written applications to actually go in and parse those files and use that data, so we've left the text file option in there, but the default is going to be HTML document. It's more modern looking. These are what we call tables. Tables are made up of cells, so when you select something, you actually can select the entire cell. When I copy and paste from a table, let's say into Excel, we remember the cell structure, so that cell structure gets copied into the Excel document as well. So it is more modern. Obviously it's more readable because of the different use of fonts and so on. Also we can do things like, let's come out of here. What I'm going to do is I'm now just going to pick a face here. I'm going to go down in my model and I'll pick a face, and I'll just get the information window on that face. Because here's something else that we can do. Since it is an HTML document, we can do things like putting in a color swatch. Show what the color is. Well, yellow is pretty easy, but if it was one of these weird colors, I had one a moment ago, I should have brought it up. It was something pine. Well, what in the hell is, it was like dark pine or something. You get to see the color. It isn't just, the name of the color. We're also talking about things like maybe putting a preview up here of the file that this is taken from. Because remember, you can capture this as an HTML document and use it as, as part of your documentation and so on. Now, this is an example of how this is going to be progressing. What you see up here is two tables that have been sort of updated to the more modern format. Down here, this is still a table, but it's in the old format. We haven't gotten around to formatting all of the content of all of the windows. There's like 125 different information windows that can be generated during an NX session. And they're all unique. And so we have to handle them one at a time. Now there's some common areas. Obviously this header is common, so that's all been taken care of. Most of the primary, but there's still a few things like here, we haven't gotten a way to make a really good tabular, to handle tabular data, but we're working on that. And so we hope to have that taken care of. Now the good news is this doesn't affect databases. So we can introduce these changes as part of maintenance releases. So over the course of the first, the 3 maintenance releases that we anticipate to be in 11, and possibly a few that will roll over into 12, we will update these incrementally as we go along, because they don't really have any effect on the data structure, because it's all presentation. Now, there's another place where this particular thing happens, and that is that we get these information windows. This is one of those 125 information windows I'm going to show you now. I'm going to make a change to the model. I'm going to subtract or delete this feature and then watch the model update. Now, how many times have you deleted a feature and then during the update something failed? I mean, it's not uncommon to happen. What happens in that situation? You're sitting here watching it sort of run through its thing, and it gets to a certain point where it's done, and if there was a failure, this information window came up, completely covering what it was you were looking at, usually. And usually first person's reaction is to go up and hit the little X at the corner of the window, closing the window. And then he sits there, looks at his model, and about 3 seconds later, the thought comes to his mind, I wonder what the hell happened. Well, you just had all that information in front of you a minute ago. Why did you throw it away? He threw it away because it blocked his view. Yeah, you could have minimized the window and it would still be there. So what we've done is we've added a new concept over here. We've added a new item over on the resource bar called the console tab. And what we've done is we've taken all of those messages, whether they're warning messages, simple information messages, or errors, and we've put them over there on that window. Now this window here, I can save it also as an HTML document. So again, I can save that. Maybe I'm doing something that's a work in progress and I need to document what's happening. And so I can save these off. This is another area where we got a lot of feedback and we'll hopefully get some implementation, maybe not in 11.0, but hopefully later on. Things like being able to remove individual items from here, because maybe some of them I don't care about, so I want to get rid of them. So I can kind of use it to kind of format a report before I save it. At the moment it's all or nothing, but it does retain. If I go off and do something else, it'll just keep adding to the bottom of this. Now, we do have some nice features in here. For example, we have a find command. So let's say I wanted to find out how many errors in here had something to do with suppression. So I just type in enough to find out that, see, there's 4 of these items that had something to do with a suppression failure. So you can use a nice search routine on here. And then again, like I said, eventually we'll have the ability to filter out just errors, warnings, or information messages. At the moment, this is a bit of a prototype. It works mostly with just error messages, but we're going to try to capture all of the stuff that used to just flash in front of you on the screen. We're going to try to capture that stuff over here